I'm Nathan Ponchard, this is Chasing Cars, and this is the 2021 Subaru Forester Sport. Now, the Sport is not a replacement for the Forester XT and its turbocharged forebears. It is simply a dress-up pack. And what did the Forester need more than anything? Something different than all the chintz and the silver that is all over this car, of which the Sport replaces all of it. Now, everything at the front here has been completely blacked out, so there is no more silver crap, and that includes the front grille. And I actually think, certainly from dead straight on, it looks pretty good. It has these orange, sort of tangerine coloured highlights that run along the front skid plate, along the side skirts down here, very obviously embedded in the roof rails there. It just adds a nice element of detail to a car that has not been known for its aesthetics. Let's be honest here. It's about having lots of glass. It also has black wheels, although they're 18s just like a normal Foresters, and they still have the same Bridgestone Jeweler HP Sport tyres, which are not really sporty at all. We have privacy glass here, which is very black on the outside, but surprisingly bright when you're in the car, which is unusual. And as we come around the back here, we have this blackout panel, which I love pretty much on any car, but in this instance, what it does is it sort of dilutes this crab claw effect of these really quite hideous rear tail lights. I'm sorry if you like them, but I just think they're awful, and I can't wait for them to be facelifted out at the end of 2021, but more of that later. At the back here, we also have an electric tailgate with more orange along here, and quite obviously a fairly insipid single pipe here, because again, we're in the same engine as a normal Forester. In the boot here, same as again a normal Forester. 498 litres, which is actually really good. Underneath the floor in the Australian models, we have a full-size spare embedded in there. We also have this quite cool luggage cover here that isn't electric, but it's just nice and neat the way that it can slide back and sort of sit in place like that. And we have electric backrests where you can pull these two and expand the boot from 498 litres to 1700 and something, which is quite big. And it's almost flat, not quite, but pretty good. The Sport also brings things like LED lights in the back of the tailgate here, so you can have some lighting down if you're having a barbecue in somewhere like this. It also has a little hook, so you can hang something from there. It's actually a really practical car. Also has two curry hooks on each side, 12-volt outlet in here, tie downs here, and the finish, besides a bit of scratchy plastic, is actually really nice, which is something that Subaru is known for. Let's get inside the car. If you thought the outside of the Forester Sport looked relatively simple, then that is not the case inside this car. While the changes to this model are fairly straightforward, and that includes even more orange, although it isn't the same orange as the outside, it's kind of looked like a set of 1990s sunglasses, in my opinion, which I may or may not have owned. It has orange stitching on the dash, more weird orange around here, orange stitching on these seats. We have Sport tabs all over the place on the doors here, on the front seats, on the back doors, and this trim that is water repellent cloth that it's interesting. It's not ultimately my idea. It looks like an old lounge, but and vinyl on the sides here instead of leather. I suppose the only two things you're missing out on in the Sport compared to the 2.5 IS that sits above it is that it doesn't have leather seats, even though it has 8-way adjustment for both fronts and heating, but with cloth, and it doesn't have the 8-speaker Harman Kardon stereo with a subwoofer and an amplifier. It only has 6 speakers like all the models below it, which is still really strong. It actually works really well, and it operates through this broader 8-inch touchscreen that sits fairly flush with the dash. The thing is, the Forester has a lot of screens. It has this one, which is nicely simple. It has this info screen up here, which is useful, but kind of irrelevant, a lot of the things that it does, and another screen in the middle here which shows the digital speedo and various bits and pieces of the safety of the car. We have seat heating here, we have the auto hold on the brake here, we have Subaru's X mode, which is either normal, but you can flick it to the left and it gives you a snow dirt setting for more of a locked in full drive kind of feel, or a deep snow mud one that turns ESC completely off straight away. I have driven Subarus with this X mode in fairly challenging conditions, and the ultimate difference isn't that huge, but I could understand that if you're in a low speed situation, it would benefit the car, because of course this car does have full-time all-wheel drive. It is not an on-demand system, and it is not front-wheel drive because it's a Subaru. In terms of the comfort and everything in this Forester Sport, this is what this car is all about. It doesn't have luxuriously plush seats, but they're in a really good position. They do have 8-way adjustment, like I mentioned. You have a fantastic view out of this car, a really low cowl down here. You can see the little lumps over the front wheel arches ahead of you, which is quaintly cute. Really low window line. The same applies in the back, and it gives this glassy, incredible feel. And included in that is the sunroof, which goes right out there, which is also standard in this Sport model, which is, again, something that just adds to the airiness and the lovely feel that you get when you're being in this car. It is not trying to be a performance car, even though it's called Sport. Ultimately, it's a family SUV, and so that's what we need to focus on here. In terms of connectivity, we have 2 USB plugs in the front here, plus a very antiquated auxiliary plug, and we have a 12-volt outlet. Subaru also gives you a CD player, so they're covering all bases for many generations. Got a lift-out tray in here with another 12-volt outlet in here, and quite a deep bin here. 2 fairly deep cup holders here. The doors just managed to take this 1 litre camping bottle, although I can see that it's already scratching the plastic. That doesn't quite fit properly. We've got little trays in the doors here with slightly padded armrests, and a bit for your phone here. Even though this doesn't have wireless charging in this model, an iPhone 11 sits perfectly in that position. There is some acclimatization required to get used to being in this car, but I think that the more that you drive it, the less that you get confused by what's going on. Let's sit in the back. So if you thought you felt roomy in the front of the Forester, the back seat is a completely different story. It's even roomier and airier. I'm sitting higher on this seat than I am in the front, so I've got this amazing view around me. And while the seat itself doesn't have the same level of under thigh support as the front seats do, I think for children and kids seats and the majority of the people that sit in the back here, it is more than ample. There's a massive amount of legroom here sitting behind myself, heaps of toe room, not a flat floor, but kind of no big deal really. I love the fact that it's got these dual level map pockets, so something pretty deep can go in there. You can put your phone in this little bit in the edge here. You can put a wallet or a purse or something in the right hand side there. The doors only take cans or Gatorades or something, not something big, but I suppose it's no real big deal. We've got an armrest here that's got another 2 can holders, in this case with gloss black in the Forester Sport. More orange stitching around everything and the Sport tabs on the doors. We also have 2 fast charge USB outlets under this slightly clumsy flap in the middle here, blanks for where the seat headers would be in another model. And the backrest in this car also has adjustment. Now, to bring the back seat down, to get the backrest down, there's a manual button up here, or there are those electric buttons in the boot that I showed you earlier. But to do the backrest rake, there's a little tab here, and it goes in 4 positions, and you just pull that, and I reckon that's pretty cool. The middle seat isn't as comfortable as the outer 2 seats, but it's pretty flat, so it makes it easy to put a baby seat there, and that's what the Forester Sport is about. It's not about being a performance car, it's about being a great family car. But let's see what it's like to drive. So given the fact the Forester Sport has exactly the same suspension and tyres and engine as the normal Forester, it's no surprise that it's not very sporty to drive. That doesn't mean it's bad to drive, it just means it's not an XT or an STI. That means that the 2.5 litre flat 4 up front still has 136 kilowatts and 239 newton meters, and relies quite heavily on the response of its CVT automatic to fill a few gaps in the bottom end of its power band and its torque output. And it actually does that really well. Subaru CVT is one of the best, and if you have to have one of them, this is probably the one you want to have. It does have a sport and intelligent button on the steering wheel. Of course it's on a button, and that perks up the throttle response and perhaps has placebo effect on the steering weighting, although I'm pretty sure it's exactly the same with both. That said, in intelligent, it's actually pretty responsive. If you stomp it really quickly, it will grab a whole bunch of revs, chuck them on the tacho, and throw as much as it can to thrust its way forward. You would expect about 9 to 9.5 seconds 0 to 100 for this car, which is actually pretty good. The fuel consumption figure is 7.4 litres per 100 for the combined number, and that's right on the money of where, say, a RAV4 2.5 is at 7.3, but some way behind where a RAV4 Hybrid would be, which is in the high 4s, and a little bit behind where Subaru's own Hybrid is. Personally though, I think the 2.5 litre is the engine to have in this car. Now, in terms of the driving experience, I suppose it's kind of much like where the interior quality is in this car right now, and that is that it isn't as superb as what the Liberty's was in the mid-2000s, certainly in the interior finish, but there's a solidity and a cohesion to it, and that transfers into the way that this car drives. What the Forester is best at is smashing over fairly bumpy and uneven surfaces because its ride is really good. It is supple and comfortable and easily takes punishment that's thrown at it. I suppose it's a shame that the steering is a little bit muddy. It does feel like it's had a blanket thrown over the amount of feedback that it has, but much like the standard Foresters have always been, the more that you drive them, the harder you drive them, and the more you ask of them, the greater the talent of its chassis and its handling, although it doesn't really encourage you to do that. And the electronics, which are fairly reactive to a whole bunch of stuff, do tend to discourage that as well, especially the ESC when punching it out of tight corners. I wish there was kind of a sport mode or something for that, but you know, we're in a sport in name only, not really for that sort of stuff, and we'll have to wait sometime if that's going to happen. The acceleration's okay, it gets along pretty well. It does add step ratios in at the top end when you're driving it to kind of limit the amount of drone that the flat four produces, which doesn't really do much for the performance, to be honest. In terms of general driving, this car is quite effortless. The tyres are not great, but they're easily replaceable. In terms of safety equipment, the Forester Sport has pretty much everything Subaru can offer as standard. The only thing I can think of it doesn't have is front parking sensors, but then you can hit the view camera here and have in this upper screen see what's at the front of the car actually visually rather than listening to a beep. It has rear AB, it has lane change assist, it has AB with pedestrian and nighttime detection. Honestly, the list is so long. At least you can turn all of it off if it annoys you, although it is a little bit intrusive. The collision warning does come on pretty early. It'll chuck the AEB on and hit the brakes when you think that you're just braking fine fairly early as well. But I suppose that's probably better than the other way around. In terms of having full-time all-wheel drive, it does make this car effortless regardless of the conditions. And here we are on a country road, on a windy 2-lane road with a few bumps in it, and the car's just loping along. It does get a little bit soft at times, but again, we're in a Forester Sport, we're not in a Forester XT, and while you can lament that, there's nothing particularly wrong with the way this car drives. It's just that the RAV4 is a little bit sportier and a little bit more rewarding. So what you're looking for with the Forester Sport is a little bit extra in design. It adds a little bit of extra colour where the other cars have a bit of chintz, and it adds a little bit of flair to the way that it looks. That is a point of difference in a range that is not known for how pretty it is. And I suppose that has to be applauded in some fashion. Now, I just wish that there was a different suspension tune in the car, like a little bit firmer. I think would actually complement it really nicely, and perhaps even 19-inch wheels, but then that would make the ride a bit more shit. So really, for a medium SUV that's for families, it is right on the money. After 20 years of having a turbocharged flagship for its Forester, it's kind of odd that the 2018 Subaru Forester generation, which is this car, didn't come with that model. It was just a standard run of cars with a naturally aspirated 2.5. And so I suppose you could look at this Sport fairly cynically and go, it's just the same as a normal car with black bits and a sport badge, which is exactly what it is. But it does add something in terms of visuals to the car, and it is a nice segue to what is potentially meant to come at the end of 2021. At the end of 2021, this car will get a midlife facelift, and it is rumoured that it will also get a turbocharged flagship, which is what the Forester needs to bring back that halo feeling of having a great model at the top end that people can aspire to. In the meantime though, the Forester Sport, in terms of being an all-rounder and a great family car, is superb. It's not the greatest car to drive in its class, that would be the RAV4, and it's certainly not the prettiest, but in terms of all-round ability and something to aspire to on that level, I think that it's terrific. If you haven't subscribed, please do so below the video, hit the notification bell and leave a comment on the 2021 Subaru Forester Sport or on Chasing Cars. Thanks for watching.